And I wonder, Dad, how we strike a balance so delicately with Pakistan, given the negative forces within it and given the reality of where bin Laden was found and killed.
It's a terribly complicated and delicate situation for them, but also for us. My instinct at this moment would be not to challenge that statement, not to mock it, not to criticize it.
Yeah.
Because we have a stake in Pakistan not exploding. We don't know what the reaction will be in the country at large or in some portions of it. I don't think it's in our interest to make Pakistan more vulnerable, not to contribute to a political upheaval. Now, obviously, there was some sort of an informal accommodation between the Pakistani government and bin Laden and his associates. Obviously, the government knew he was there. I suspect they probably put some restrictions on him, in fact, operationally. This is why there weren't that many more statements by him in recent times. So I imagine he probably wasn't using that compound as the headquarters for terrorism worldwide. I suspect, I really don't know. There was probably some sort of limit on it. But they knew he was there. In effect, it was a kind of de facto umbrella under which he was living. But given the stakes involved, I think it's important for us to take the position. We did what we had to do. We'll do it again if anybody else tries it. The Pakistani government has to be aware of that. And we accept their sense of relief that he's gone. And then let's see what happens in the field. We also have to wait and see what happens in Afghanistan itself. My guess is there won't be that much difference there, because Taliban is really not dependent on al-Qaeda. It was a kind of an informal alliance of convenience.
Right. So, Dad, before you go, one of the last times you were on this show, you very bluntly graded President Obama's foreign policy. And I'm just wondering, and you graded it in terms of the vision he laid out versus as a candidate versus the vision that he was actually carrying out as president. Does this change anything, or at least open up a world of opportunity for this president to carry out his vision?
Well, first of all, I think the grade I gave when both of you pressed me was incomplete.
Well,
and this particularly, on this issue, completes something very important. And he deserves credit for it, and the U.S. Armed Forces deserve credit for it. This is a terribly important phenomenon. It's an event. It's symbolic. It's significant. The president was terrific last night. It is not the same thing as a comprehensive long-term strategy. And I think he has now an opportunity, because his prestige is naturally higher, and he is rightly being complimented for the leadership he has provided. But it's an opportunity now to move forward with a strategy that addresses some of the key problems inherent in our very complicated relationship with a huge population, particularly religiously motivated, and in a particularly sensitive region in which we have vital moral interests. For example, the peace process and security of Israel and the Palestinians. We have vital economic and geopolitical interests. And it happens to be a region inhabited by the people affected by what happened last night. So this is a strategic moment of opportunity that has to be seized and not allow it to be dissipated.
Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, Dad, thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow night at the Atlantic Council dinner. Thanks very much for being on the show this morning. I called him at 11:30 last night and booked him. Right. I don't think he was happy with the call.
I don't think he was either, but we're glad he answered the call. Right now, let's bring in the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, Republican Congressman Peter King of New York. Peter, you lost more constituents on September 11th than any other congressman, obviously. What are your thoughts this morning?
This is a great moment for the United States, and let me, as a Republican, give President Obama tremendous credit for this. This was a significant military operation. He had to pull the trigger on it. He carried it out. I supported President Bush's policies. The fact is, it was President Obama who carried this mission to conclusion. I think it's important for all Americans to stand behind him and give him the credit as Commander-in-Chief for what he did. And at a very personal level, knowing so many family and friends, family members, friends, here in the district who lost members of their families, lost close relatives, associates, people they work with. I can tell you this morning there was a tremendous sense of relief among them. I've gotten calls from many of them. They just feel gratified, not so much happy as gratified, and finally there's some sense of closure and justice to this horrible moment that occurred almost 10 years ago.
We're looking at images of Times Square. We've got three New Yorkers here, obviously Charles and Peggy and Donnie Deutsch. A great night. Great night for New York City, for America, for the world, but especially for New York City, as Peter King, like all of you, new people, so personally affected by 9/11.
New York and this country, you can go back obviously to 9/11 and obviously how we know the world changed. And if you look at the 10 years since, as a country, I think we've started to rightfully so doubt ourselves a little bit. Whether it's all of a sudden wars that we can't close out, whether it's, wait a second, I bought my house and the mortgage is blowing up, and wait a second, are we this great nation? You and I have talked a lot about this on our show. And I think, and Mike talked about this earlier, what happened yesterday in New York and across this country is for the first time in 10 years we did a collective fist pump as a country. Yes, we can. And I think if everybody watching is thinking about the way they were affected at that moment when you heard, I know a friend of mine called me, and we all got this surge, I think that's going to be profound. Guys who basically, maybe a guy who's been out of work for 2 months and maybe was having trouble getting out of bed looking for that job, maybe he's out a little faster today. And I think that has, for all 300 million Americans starting in this city, a pump that will be culturally profound, yes, we can.
Let's talk generationally as well. It's been such a you have a son the age of my son. It's been a rough 10, 11 years for this generation, and we saw the jubilant crowds, and I want to get Peter King in here as well, obviously. But our children saw something they haven't seen over the past decade.
I think what they saw last night was the visual return of competence.
It's not just our children, it's all of us.
All of us have not
Understood,
but these young people in their 20s, they were children when 9/11 happened. It was a terrible blow. It rocked them. They'll write novels about it in the future. And they saw us last night, after this time, after persistence and patience, come back hard and in a meaningful way. It was the return of competence, I think.
Peter King,
and that's what they were waving flags
Peter
about.
King, it means a lot, doesn't it? For a lot of parents had to sit down and talk to their kids 10 years ago and explain what happened. It was a new reality for all of us. America was not safely protected by two oceans.
No, it really was. Our world changed on September 11th, and it's been a rough 9.5 years. It really has, and it's going to be rough as we go forward. But last night, I think, was a great opportunity for Americans to see what our greatness can be, for young people to see that America is still alive and vibrant. And I heard what Donnie said about what people heard. I got a call about an hour and a half before the president spoke last night. The White House called me to tell me what he was going to say, and it took about 3 seconds for it to really sink in as to what they were telling me after all these years to actually realize we were going to get, we had gotten Osama bin Laden. And,
And Peter, the manner in which we got him. Peter, the manner in which we got him, I had heard about an hour and a half before what was the president was going to talk about. I thought it was a random drone attack.
This is going to be a movie.
Peter, could you have ever imagined, as chairman of Homeland Security, that it would be Navy SEALs firing a weapon, shooting Osama bin Laden at point-blank range?
Well, that's the best way to have it done. I mean, I know a lot of Navy SEALs. I know how much they wanted to do something like this, but no, it was almost too much to hope for. After 9.5 years of frustration, it was too much to hope for, but thank God they did carry it out. And it shows, though, this is going to be a long, hard war. I mean, think of all of the false leads they had. Think of all the missions they ran where they were not successful because either bin Laden had gotten away or we got wrong information. But they never gave up. And I think that should also be a signal to young people in our country today. This is not an easy war where we just drop one bomb. There's going to be a lot of frustration. It's going to go on, whether it's Afghanistan, no matter where it is. The war against Al-Qaeda and its affiliates is going to go on for a long time. And right now, as jubilant and as satisfied as we are right now, we also realize that this increases the threat to the United States. So we have to really be on our guard, probably more than we have at any time since September 11th. So it's sort of the, again, it's a wake-up call as to even at moments of great jubilation, there's also great stress. But as a country, if we stick together, we can handle it.
Peter King, thank you.
And we're going to win.
Chairman, thank you so much for being patient and staying with us. We greatly appreciate it and wanted to hear your voice again as a congressman who lost the most constituents on that terrible, terrible day 9.5 years ago. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, and Charles.